Welcome to Security in Focus Tech Talk, a regular podcast focused on informing and supporting the needs of Gallagher Command Centre installer technicians, administrators and operators.
Hey team, it's Matt and Shane here doing podcast number 1. Today's topic is going to be Perimeter with Dave Solly. Hey, just a little bit about me. Hey, I'm excited to be here, to have the chance to hear more about our company, products and staff. Myself, I'm the technical support team leader here at Gallagher. Been here for 8 years. I'm a real technical person. I love troubleshooting, love asking the hard questions. I'm passionate about our world-class customer support experience as well. I love our innovative company. With all that said, I hope we can bring the listeners some awesome content with some fun along the way. Over to you, Shane.
Hi everyone. My goal is to create some great technical content for our listeners. Having been in the technical support environment for the last 18 years, and more recently looking after the engineering team, I'm looking forward to creating some content and also sharing some stuff along the way with our listeners.
Thanks, Shane. Hey, so with all that said, welcome along, Dave. Welcome along to our podcast today about Perimeter. Hey, so just give us a quick intro about yourself, Dave, and your journey.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to be here. I've been with Gallagher for 10 years now, looking after mostly the Perimeter portfolio for that entire time. I come from a mechanical engineering background and 13 years of product development before that, so delivering solutions to customer problems is kind of what I do for and have done for a very long time. My role started just with hardware, evolved into electronics, and then into the sensors and various other things, and now it's expanded further, incorporating our access control readers and I/O boards and stuff.
Cool, thanks, Dave. Hey, I guess with all that said, we're going to talk about Perimeter today. What is the Monitored Pulse Fence, and why is it not referenced as a perimeter fence?
That's an interesting question, Matt. It's all on the perimeter fence, so they're not mutually exclusive. I guess it really comes down to perception, because a large part of the perimeter portfolio is related to energized fencing, or monitored pulse fencing in Gallagher world. So we have a tendency to default to that context, which is a large reason why we refer to it as we default to monitored pulse fence. But we have a range of other technologies that we use, as well as integrations to other systems, so it's definitely much wider than that.
Thank you for letting us know about that, MPF. But what's the difference between perimeter and access control?
This is a good question. But let me turn it back on you a little bit there, Shane. You were the lucky one to ask this. What's the difference between a door and a gate if you exclude the construction method?
Yeah, good point. I guess maybe one's engineered and one's not.
Yep, exactly. It's the construction point, right? Essentially, they're the same thing. A door lets someone into your building, a gate lets someone onto your site. Ultimately, perimeter security is access control. It's detection at the perimeter boundary. It's the first point of access control, if you will. First point where a response to a breach can be managed. As an example, we've got some commercial sites where they used to have to take their equipment inside the building every night. Since they put the pulse fence on, they can now leave that gear outside. So you're just extending the boundary, I guess, of your building in some ways.
That'd save a lot of time, wouldn't it?
Oh, huge amount of time. Imagine being able to kick back, chill out and have a beer in that time frame that you would have been shifting motorbikes and stuff back inside the building.
Oh, and there's a bit of security there too, right? You feel more secure when you've got a big perimeter fence around you.
Absolutely.
I guess when we're talking about that, like, can any channel partner buy and install our monitored pulse fence?
Not just any channel partner. There are some challenges with doing it. You have to know what you're doing. Like anything, you can't just go and install a network switch and expect it to work. You have to understand how it works and how it all goes. But it's pretty easy to get certified, and to do those things we have a range of courses, everything from basic fence installer courses through to fully networked into command center connection and all those options in between.
Great. So how do I get certified?
Have a chat to your local BDM, sign up to the Security Hub if you're an existing channel partner. They can take you through the process and look at what you need to know to help you get down that pathway.
Okay, great. Do that.
Awesome. Easy as that. Hey, so we hear that perimeter is the first line of defence in a layered strategy. So what's the benefit of it, and why have MPF at the perimeter?
Well, you'd be doing well to have MPF inside the building. For many fencing contractors and integrators, there's huge amounts of benefits in a monitored pulse fence. It's an active deterrent, so people take, generally speaking, one look at it and walk away and go, I'll go in the neighbour's property, thanks, because I don't want to get hurt. And it's also a very, very good detection system that is largely impervious to false alarms, which is very, very bad when you're talking about breaking into facilities and stuff like that. The less false alarms you can have, the more reliance you have when a natural alarm comes through. So it's very good in that regard. And as we talked before, it's the first point of entry to a site. If you can stop them at that perimeter, you can actually start responding appropriately as you go. So for fencing contractors, you'll no doubt be familiar with chain link fence, right? It's the most common fencing used around the world. To break into a site using chain link fence, it's actually really, really easy. You just undo the little hog clips at the bottom on the tie wire, lift it up, and just wander through. And most times, most people won't even know you've even been there. So it's a pretty poor defence mechanism just to have a chain link fence. You often see 3 rows of barbed wire along the top of the fence. They're really, really good at holding a jersey or a jacket or something like that in place while you climb over without getting tangled in the barbed wire. They're great for helping people in. People will often put CCTV out in their perimeter, so a lot of integrators and stuff already do perimeter, but they do it with CCTV. It's a really, really good tool for seeing someone committing the act rather than actively deterring them from doing it in the first place. I recall a transport and logistics site a while ago where they're having trouble with people tampering with the trucks, coming in, taking the batteries out of the trucks. Those things are expensive, right? So they talked to one of our channel partners. The channel partner suggested putting a pulse fence in. The customer was like, no, it's too expensive, They worked out what the fence cost would be, some cameras would be, what the cost of the trucks being off the road would be, decided to go with cameras. So what ended up happening is they had a really good record the next time these guys come in and took the batteries out of the truck. They just flipped up their hoodies, walked in, took the batteries, walked back out. And might come as no surprise, but the customer rang the channel partner the next day and says, so how about that fence? They haven't had an issue since.
It makes sense really when you think about it, doesn't it? I mean, it's great to have video these days, but it doesn't actually stop the crime from happening.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
And I think that's the key part, right, with the video and the layered solution we touched on at the start of the question, is it's part of a solution. Video is absolutely a key part of security and it should never be discounted, but it's not going to deter people from coming in. People look at camera signs, I just need to pull my hoodie down or whatever, I can hide from it. If you haven't got someone actively watching it or you've got really, really high-end analytics, it's not going to stop the problem from happening. It's a reactive thing, but it's very good for validating an alarm. If an alarm happens on my fence line and it's pouring with rain, do I want to go out and have a look? And I'm probably going to go, look out the window, I can't see anything. But if you've got a camera out there, you can swing that camera, you can have a look, you can go, hang on, someone's coming in, send the appropriate response out, or it might be a tree branches blowing in the middle of a storm. So.
Cool. I mean, I guess we're saying all that. What sites would typically use our perimeter solution?
Pretty much anything across the whole spectrum of what you can think. Everything from a commercial site, like a boatyard and various other things where they've got higher value goods stored outside in particular. Maintenance, industrial yards, you've got a lot of equipment outside. All the way through to critical infrastructure. We actually have a huge amount of product that's installed at the national infrastructure level. So your large power utilities, the substations and those sort of environments, keeping those happening and running, keeping people safe. For a lot of them it is really about safety. It is keeping people out for their own safety as much as it is protecting the asset itself.
So you talk about people being kept out. Do we use perimeter for keeping things in?
Absolutely. It's a very good deterrent and it's a very good detection method. So a large portion of what we do in that higher end of the security spectrum is around the correctional facilities. We do a lot of those in New Zealand, Australia, quite a lot in the USA, and it's very effective. I'm not aware of any breaches on our perimeter where someone's got through the pulse fence undetected.
All right, that's good to know. Thanks, Dave.
Lets you sleep safe at night.
Cool. And I guess thinking about it, you used to travelling around, you look at these fences and you see these yellow signs hanging off them. That's another indicator, right?
Absolutely. Yep. That warning sign itself often is enough to deter the casual attacker on a fence. Most people will look at that, they see the little symbol on the warning sign, and they don't want to touch that, it might hurt. We're conditioned from when we're children to be afraid of electricity, and it will do bad things to you. But the reality of it is an energised fence, or a proper energised fence is probably the best way to look at it. It's engineered to be safe. It will hurt, absolutely, but it won't physically harm you.
Cool. So other than a fence, what integrations can we add if a customer has a specific need?
The list is pretty endless, really. Command Centre is probably the largest undersold piece of value in a perimeter site. That's really the glue that brings everything together. You can layer it up with cameras, different detection technologies. You can have buried sensor technologies if you have open areas you want to detect. We can pretty much integrate with anyone. And depending on the site and depending on what the need is, we have quite a few integrations already, and we would probably come up with more as the need arose.
How safe is MPF?
Very safe, Matt. You're welcome to touch it. We can set up an energizer anytime.
Okay.
It's actually really, really safe. It's an incredibly uncomfortable feeling of
right.
more than my share, and I'm perfectly normal, right? There's international safety standards in place that we're required to comply to, that ensure that the amount of energy delivered, the time that the energy is delivered, and how far apart the pulses are, it constrains and controls all of those parameters that could actually be very dangerous to people. And we have people that sit on the working groups for the international standards, so we're involved at the front line of those coming forward, and all our products are made to comply with the standard at time of manufacture.
Does a fence need to be energised?
No, you could do it with it unenergised, but you would be substituting your detection capability on the fence unless you add a secondary detection method like a disturbance sensor or something like that to it. And then if you were doing something like that, you could have the fence in a de-energised state, for lack of a better term, where an alarm comes off the disturbance sensor and it turns the fence controller on. That's where the power of Command Centre really comes into its own, as you can create a responsive system. Okay. That if someone's highly concerned about the pulse, like they might have small children around and stuff like that, and kids like to touch things they shouldn't, they can protect themselves from that, where it's only responsive to a natural alarm.
Okay, great. What other technologies can be deployed to the monitor perimeter?
In our bucket, we've got disturbance sensors. We've got an acoustic cable-based sensor that's from a third-party manufacturer that we integrate with, and we also have a tension sensor. So if you've ever heard of a term called taut wire, which is quite commonly used in a lot of corrections and other places around the world, it's Gallagher's take on a taut wire system is the tension sensor. So it's actively measuring the tension on the wire all the time, and it's making smart alarm decisions based on the movement that's happening there.
So you're talking about the Z10, Z20?
That is the Z10, and the Z20 is the disturbance sensor, yep.
Yep. Cool. I always remember the term pulse fence. Someone said it's actually, the reason we pulse it is to give someone the chance to let go of it.
Correct. This separation of the pulses allows people to reasonably get away from the fence without hurting themselves or harming themselves. It also takes into consideration the arterial fibrillation and stuff like that can cause impact on people's body and do nasty things to them. So all of those really important parts are all considered as part of the safety standards, and that's all what we comply to with how the pulse is delivered, the energy in the pulse.
Is that where syncing comes in?
Syncing is a very important part of that. If your fence energizers are not synced, you could be conceivably touching two different sections of the fence, where one section might be pulsing half a second out of pulse with the other section of the fence, and you could receive two pulses in quick duration. So yes, syncing is an important part of that.
Thanks, Dave. So how hard is it to design one of these things?
It can be pretty complex if you don't know what you're doing, particularly as you go for a higher value fence, like if it's a critical infrastructure site. There's a lot more things you need to understand and know. But that's actually a really, really good question, because we're working on a new product at the moment that is specifically related to designing and estimating monitored pulse fences, particularly aimed at that more commercial, industrial level site. And this will be a web-based tool. So you will be able to go into this tool, input your location details. It'll bring up a Google Maps API. There's a toolbox on the side of the screen, allows you to draw your fence line, apply your zones and your gates, and change your hardware configurations. Then you hit the build button and go through the different steps of how big do I want the fence, how many wires do I want on the fence, what type of energizer do I want. It just steps you through that process. Out the other side, you get a complete bill of materials with all the hardware that you need to build it.
Wow, sounds easy.
It's aimed at simplifying that whole process, because it is hard. If you've never done anything like this, you often will get people that will learn very basics of what this strain point is and what that strain point is and how long this needs to be, but then they'll forget those critical things like you mentioned synchronizing earlier on, Shane. If they forget that, then they've got to add in, I've got a big perimeter, I need to add a whole heap of fiber transceivers to facilitate my sync. Oh man, that just cost me an extra $5,000. And you start getting to the point where people get really frustrated. This gives them the opportunity to add those basic defaults in as they go without too much complication.
And visualizing stuff too is great, right? You can have a map, you can place stuff on the map.
Absolutely, and that's going to be one of the biggest powerful things of this tool. It'll give you a running estimate all the way along, so down the bottom of the screen you'll see the price changing as you add zones or delete zones or do things. But the visual graphic you can see your whole perimeter on the fence, you can see all the gates, and then you've got color-coded zones that will tell you this is zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, so you can actually sit there with your customer and go, hey Matt, this is what we're recommending do this zone because people could break in easier here and various other things. So it gives you a really nice tool that you can visualize how it's going to work.
Good. Really good.
Sounds like a game changer.
Hopefully.
I guess talking game changers, like, hey, is there anything exciting we can start to talk about now here today for our listeners?
Well, the estimation tool is one.
Yeah,
I'm
great.
personally really excited about that. It's been a long time coming and it's a really hard tool. So we've actually just, literally this morning, we just engaged with a couple of our Gallagher team to do some usability testing and do the final validation of that. So we're hoping to be pushing out some marketing communications and stuff like that in the next couple of weeks, which would be really quite exciting to get that in the hands of people. We've got the new slimline modular post. So when you look at a physical pulse fence on the fence line at the moment, it's quite obtrusive. There's quite a lot of structure to it.
Yes.
The slimline modular post gives you a lot sleeker, cleaner, more aesthetically pleasing look. So you're taking away a big chunk of the steel. And of course then there's a massive gain, I suppose you could say, in the carbon footprint to a certain extent, being that you're going from shipping 3.5 metre lengths of steel, and a lot of them, to shipping bundles of 700 millimetre long modular posts. So, a lot easier to handle, a lot easier to work with, quick, simple, easy for the partner to put up, and yeah.
Are they still steel?
No. So they are a high-grade glass-filled nylon. So they're designed to deal with the environmental conditions, but have all the insulation properties they need to let the fence work. So we still obviously have the steel posts and the standard insulators. So if you have that higher degree of security requirement for your site, you still use that product, whereas this one's aimed at that mid-tier of the market and being a product that's suitable for the level of requirement they have.
Easier to transport too, right?
Very, very much so. Easy to work with as well. Pick up a couple of boxes of 25 of these and walk down to the corner of the site. Try pick up 25 posts and walk to the end of the site. You're going to be looking like our friend Matt here.
That's it.
Yep, and the next other new exciting thing we're working on at the moment is a new fence controller. So we're actually doing a whole new energizer, which, as we talked about standards earlier, and they're always constantly evolving. Part of Gallagher's commitment to the safety and keeping people safe, right? It's one of our core values of our business, is that safety. So the new energizer will be in line with the new standard that's just coming out now. So we're aiming to have that out in the not too distant future, and that'll have a couple of new features with it and stuff like safety extra low voltage, so you'll have effectively no field detection on the new energizer without having to have alternate products on the fence, which will be pretty cool.
Great.
Awesome. Sounds like an exciting project.
Okay, so that pretty much brings us to the end of all of that. Have you got some questions?
Well, it's more just, I was going to put it to Dave actually, or what the common questions that you get. What's the most common question that, well, Matt might be able to answer from a technical support point of view, but what's the most common thing that you find or query that you get?
Is it safe? That's probably the biggest question that we get. That question gets changed a little bit in the Americas market. It tends to be, am I going to get sued if I have this?
Right.
Which ultimately it relates back to, is it safe? And the short answer, we've talked about safety and standards. Absolutely, it's safe. If you compare deterrent systems that are out there in the market, you've got razor wire, barbed wire, rolling toppers, and various other items like that. They're all designed to physically harm you. They're designed to entrap you and harm you. A pulse fence is designed to deter you without physically harming you. So it's actually probably the safest deterrent on the market that you could actually have on a site. What else do we get asked a lot? Is it expensive? Well, yes and no. It depends on your site and it depends on your requirements. You can scale the build from anything from a simple topper on top of an existing fence to a full scale internal fence. If you look at a critical infrastructure site, their fences are considerably more expensive, but they're also having a lot smaller zones, a lot tighter detection areas, and they're deploying other technologies in the middle of that. Whereas a commercial site, they might have a full height fence, but it'll be no more than 3 meters high, and it'll probably have relatively long zones of 150, 200 meters detection zones. So they're not looking for that same level of responsiveness to where's the alarm, how do I respond as a critical site. So it depends on the level of the site as to how hard it is or how expensive it is.
And I guess when you integrate it with Command Center, you can have it do anything you want, right?
In a lot of respects, yeah. I mean, Command Center is actually a really amazing tool when it comes to perimeter security, because you can layer up those technologies. You can adjust and change the response of what happens when an alarm comes in. If you've got multiple technologies where I've got a disturbance sensor on the fence, I can use that as a first knock detection, and I can actually have the pulse fence completely off and only turn it on if I need to turn it on. So swing cameras to look at the zone that's on. You actually find when you look at a correction site, their detection zones are based on what they can see on a camera without having to physically move the camera. So the fence zone will be set the same. They'll have upper and lower zones so they can determine whether or not someone trying to crawl through the fence or someone trying to climb over the fence. So there's a lot of things that you can do in those ways to really heighten the awareness of what's happening on the fence. We also have a adaptive alarm threshold in the system where it will trend with environmental changes. So if it's getting really, really bad weather and fence voltage is dropping on the fence because of the weather, the threshold will move with that rather than put the fence into an alarm, which is something that's unique to us.
I guess these fencing drivers have temperature sensors in them, don't they?
Correct. Yep. So if you're installed in a very hot environment, and we have a lot of them installed in quite hot environments and deserts and various other places around the world, the Energizer can, as a standalone unit, it will enter different modes of operation. So it'll go into what we call a go slow mode when it gets too hot, and it will double its pulse rate. So it will be, instead of 1.5 seconds, it'll be 3 seconds. So it's not generating as much energy, not generating as much heat. When you put that into Command Center, you can configure those values, and you can use that to drive an output that will allow you to turn a fan on, and the cabinet could have air blowing across it as a result of that. You could cause it to raise an alarm and say, hey, I'm over temperature, we need to go and do something about this. So your responsiveness becomes a lot more enabled.
I guess from a tech support point of view, I guess the type of questions that we do get coming into the line would be always, and we spoke about it at the beginning of the podcast, was syncing, and when should I sync? How do I sync?
Mm-hmm. So we have two mechanisms of synchronization. We have a high voltage synchronization, which attaches onto the pulse that's being delivered, and it synchronizes the outgoing pulse with that, so it's always in line. The most common one is LV sync. That's the most standard mode nowadays, where it's sending a signal over an RS485 line and it's telling the Energizer when to fire. So you should always synchronize your fences, unless you've got a simple box that's all four sides, the one zone, one energizer, and it's nowhere near in contact with another fence, then you don't need to synchronize that because it's one pulse. Essentially, synchronizing your energizers makes multiple energizers act as one. So the pulse always goes out together. Fiber optics can be a bit of a challenge where you've got large sites, so you need to use fiber optic transceivers. Getting those set up right with the right lengths can be challenging if you haven't done that before. But we've got good references to that. We've got people in Shane's team that are very, very knowledgeable on how to do this, and with a quick email or call through to tech support, they can feed that information through, and it should help solve a lot of that challenge.
Great. And then you talked about neighbouring properties. Some of the questions that we do get into tech support is like, how close can my fence be to the neighbours, or am I allowed to connect it to my neighbours?
Yep. So connecting anything to your neighbours, you need your neighbours' permission.
Right.
No different to if you were doing something at your own house and you wanted to dovetail into something they have. You have to have their permission to do it. Simple rule of thumb is, if it's not synchronised and there's two independent pulses, there needs to be 2.5 metres between, or there needs to be a barrier that blocks out 2.5 metres. So you have to control that space. The easiest way to do that, if they've got let's say they've got a competitor's product on their site, and they turn their product off during the day and various other things, but you don't want to turn yours off during the day because maybe you've got higher security requirements. What you can do is, with our energizers, you can bring in a synchronization signal from their fence, so you can take their pulse, feed it into our energizer as a primary, and then the rest of them will act as a secondary to that pulse. Now when that pulse disappears, that one there, that primary sync signal's coming into, will act as the primary on it, and will synchronize the rest of the Gallagher energizers in that circuit. So
Cool. Yeah, so generally that would be our main queries coming into tech support.
Great. I guess for the listeners out there, like, where can they find more information about this sort of stuff?
Security Hub's a good portal to go through to get a lot of information. We've got a lot of case studies up there now, where through different levels of the market now, where anything from relatively small commercial sites where they've seen massive benefit in having the system installed, through to critical national infrastructure sites. There's some really good information up there as to what it's meant to them as a customer, which is really the important part, is what problem is it solving, providing a duty of care from a customer's perspective to their own staff, as well as to the well-being of people around them. So it does a very good job of that.
I guess case studies are great, where a channel partner can take them, go talk to their customers and say, look, these sites are great, got this product.
Yep, absolutely. And we've got a lot of people in the team around the world that have got a lot of experience with these things. And our Gallagher BDMs and that are very, very happy to sit there with a channel partner and talk to the customer about all these technical challenges and highlighting the benefit that it will bring for the customer. Like the transport and logistics yard, the channel partner involved in that tried to promote the right thing. The customer just wasn't quite there in their mind. They were more concerned about the money. But when they worked it out, and it actually cost them less in the end than what 2 incidences on their site did.
Hindsight's a great thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's really where the biggest problem with security, probably in particular perimeter security, is it tends to be reactive versus proactive. So people tend to put it in after something's happened versus looking at it beforehand. I was talking to a customer a little while ago now. Before they moved into their new site, they put a full pulse fence up around the entire site, similar to the commercial example we talked about earlier, where they have equipment sitting outside and everything else. And I asked them, when we were doing some work on their site and just looking at some bits and pieces, can you quantify the value of what it's meant to you in having this? And he said, no, I can't. It's like, well, why is that? And he goes, because we've never been broken into. I can reasonably assume we would have, but we've never been broken into. So is that because no one's bothered? Well, with the equipment what we've got on site, they probably would have. Or is it because the fence has actually deterred them from even attempting to try? And you assume the positive, that's where it is. But yeah, it's hard to quantify the value of something until you have an event to put it against.
Look, that's a great story, isn't it? Keep your building safe.
Yeah, well, you think about it. How much money do you spend on your building? If you've got a $10 million building and someone comes and smashes up the doors and the windows trying to get into your equipment,
Yep.
there's a lot of damage you have to fix.
Yeah.
And you have to think about the downtime too, right?
Yep. And how do your staff feel going into a building that people are stealing things from or various other things? Do they feel comfortable? Do they feel protected and secure? Their cars parked in car parks. If the car park's secure and I've got a really nice car, am I going to feel more comfortable parking it inside the fence line or outside the fence line? I think you'll find it's pretty easy.
And look, that's what we're all about, isn't it? Keeping our community safe and keeping people feeling safe. So it's really good, really good. Thank you, Dave. Have we got any more questions there, Shane, today?
No, it's pretty much answered all my questions you got there. I had there, Dave. So from my point of view, it's more, obviously our channel partners need to know that they can ring us. They can ring us if they've got any questions, come through to technical support, and they can get escalated off to security engineering.
Hey, thanks, Dave. That's been awesome information today. I have learnt heaps. But I guess where to from here, Shane? Let's talk tech support. I guess if customers have problems, look, you reach out to tech support via our email or give us a phone call from any regions in the world. Support model would be, you come into tech support, we'd raise a ticket, and then generally, depending on the query, it would go through to the engineering team where it would get picked up, Shane.
That's right. As Dave mentioned before, we've got some great engineers who can assist with anything ranging from design to bill of materials.
Cool. Awesome. And obviously they can find more information on our website at security.gallagher.com. So thank you, Dave. Thank you for coming in today.
Yeah, cheers, Dave.
Thanks, team. Bye for now.